Hola! Now we're going to talk about verbos reflexivos, or reflexive verbs. What does that mean, reflexive? Well, when you have a reflection, it means something is looking back at you. A normal verb, we have an example, ver, to see. The reflexive verb, though, is made up of two parts. Verse is a reflexive verb. Ver is just to see, verse, to see oneself. When you look at a mirror, you look in the water, you see your reflection. Something is looking back at you. The reflexive verb is made up of two parts. Ver, the regular part, the verb, and se, which is the reflexive pronoun. That's what we're going to talk about now for the next few minutes. First of all, let's look at the verb. Yo veo, I see. Tú ves, you see. Él, ella, usted ve. He, she, you sees. Nosotros vemos, we see. Ellos, ellas, ustedes ven. They, or you plural, see. So the action here is going from person A to person B. Person A is seeing somebody else. Now what happens when we make it reflexive? Now let's conjugate the reflexive verb verse, to see one's self. Well, let's take another color. Yo veo, I see. Now to change that to say I see me, or I see myself, we add this reflexive pronoun me. Yo me veo. I see me. Or in English, I see myself. Tú, the reflexive pronoun. Tú te ves. Te. Tú te ves. You see yourself. You're not doing the seeing now. The seeing is coming back to you. So here, action B now, the reflecting is going back to person A. Él se ve. Él se ve. He sees himself, or we could say like he's seen or he's looked at. We'd say él se ve bien. In English we would say he looks good. He's not doing the looking there. He's being reflected on by somebody else who's looking at him saying he looks good. So he looks at somebody. He is person A looking at person B. When we say él se ve bien, he looks good. Now person B is reflecting back on person A, the reflective verb. Ella se ve. Usted se ve. Now let's go to the nosotros form. Nosotros nos vemos. Nosotros nos vemos. We see ourselves, or we're seen. Ellos, ellas, and ustedes. Again, we use se. Ellos se ven bien. Means they see themselves good, or they are seen as good, or they look good. The action of looking or seeing is coming back to them. If I say, el auto se ve nuevo, the car is seen new, or the car looks new. The car is not looking, it has no eyes. El auto se ve nuevo, that looking new is being reflected on by somebody else coming back to the car. I know it's tricky, but let's look at another example. Let's look at the verb llamar. The verb llamar, to call. Remember the double L in Spanish sounds like a Y. Llamar is the verb to call. Yo llamo, I call. This is person A doing the action. Yo llamo un taxi. I call a taxi. I'm doing the calling. Tú llamas, you call. Tú llamas la policía, you call the police. Él llama su mamá, he calls his mother. Nosotros llamamos, we call. Ellos llaman, they call. The action of calling now is being done by the person we're talking about. But to change that to a verbo reflexivo, we would add the infinitive now, se. Llamarse. Llamarse now doesn't mean to call, means to call oneself. And that's why when we get into the reflexive pronoun now, it's yo me llamo. Yo me llamo means, literally, I myself am called. So yo me llamo John. I'm called John. In other words, I don't call now. I'm not calling a taxi. Yo me llamo, I'm called, or I call myself John. Somebody else now, person B, is doing the calling back to me. They see me, John. I say, yes, I'm called John. The action of calling isn't originating from me. I'm not calling a cab. I'm the one who's being called. Tú te llamas, you're called. In other words, you call yourself. Right? Tú te llamas Maria, right? You're called Maria. Él, ella y usted se llama. Él se llama Roberto. In other words, he's called Roberto, or he calls himself Roberto. He's not doing the calling. Él llama la policía. He calls the police would be just as a regular verb. Él se llama Roberto. He calls himself Roberto. The action of calling now is coming back to him, reflecting back. Do you see the difference? The regular verb, the person we're talking about, is originating the action here. I call, he calls, we call. Now, when we change it to a reflexive verb, using the reflexive pronouns, the action is coming back. Yo me llamo. I call myself, or I'm the one being called. Él se llama. He calls himself. He's the one being called. Nosotros nos llamamos. We call ourselves. Right? Ellos se llaman. They're called, or they call themselves. The action of calling now is not originating with ellos. They're the ones being called back by whoever is doing the calling. Do you see the difference here of the reflexive pronoun? Yo llamo, I call. Yo me llamo, I'm called myself. Yo me llamo John. I'm not doing any calling here. The calling is coming back to me. People call me John. Let's look at one more example just to make sure we understand this concept. Okay, let's look at the verb perder, to lose. Perder is conjugated as such. Yo pierdo, I lose. Yo pierdo el juego, I lose the game. Tú pierdes, you lose. Tú pierdes tus llaves, you lose your keys. Él pierde, ella pierde, usted pierde, whatever you lose, right? You lose something. Él pierde el libro, he loses the book. Nosotros perdemos. Here the spelling stays the same as the infinitive. Nosotros perdemos, we lose. Ellos pierden. Ellas pierden, ustedes pierden. So the person we're talking about here is doing the losing. But when we switch it over to reflexive, perderse, to lose oneself, things change now in the meaning. Yo pierdo el libro, I lose the book. The losing is coming from person A, that's me. I'm doing the losing to the book. Now when we make this reflexive, we add the reflexive pronoun me. Yo me pierdo. Now I'm not doing the losing here. Who's lost here? Yo me pierdo means I lose myself. In other words, I'm lost. We could say, cuando voy al supermercado, when I go to the supermarket, yo me pierdo. I lose myself. In other words, I'm the one getting lost. So the losing now, the action of losing, is coming back to me. You see the difference? Tú te pierdes. Tú te pierdes, you lose yourself. In other words, you're the one that's getting lost. The losing is coming to you. Él, ella, usted pierde, he loses. But now, él se pierde, he's the one that's getting lost. He's the one losing himself. Nosotros nos perdemos means we lose ourselves. Cuando vamos a la ciudad, siempre nos perdemos. When we go to the city, we always lose ourselves. The losing is happening to us, or in other words, when we go to the city, we always get lost. The losing is coming to us. We're not losing something, the losing is coming back to us. Y ellos, ellas, y ustedes se pierden. They get lost. You see the difference here? I lose, yo pierdo. I get lost, yo me pierdo. The losing's coming back to me. The action is being reflected back to me with the reflexive pronoun.